Greetings and welcome back to Quack Poker. Hi, today we are actually playing on America's Card Room. Just playing a $5 sit and go. I wanted to do some higher stakes ones, but there wasn't really anything running right now. So we're just going to start off with this here. And we're starting off with a nice hand here, ace 10, and we can go ahead. This is a sit and go tournament, so this is the entire tournament here is this one table, basically. And we're just trying to win it all. The top three places pay, but really you want to make the upper stuff to get more than your buy-in back. And look at that, we take down the first pot. I always say it's bad luck to take down the first pot, because then you start getting cocky, and then you start playing bad. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, we're going to just play through this one sit and go today. We'll see how it goes. I've had pretty good success with the sit and goes on this site so far. Again, this is America's Card Room, which is where I've started playing now. Seems to be where the most online action in America is that I've seen right now, especially for like lower stakes sit and goes, and really cash of all levels seems to be pretty populated on here. So that's kind of cool. I've tried Bovada and some of the other sites, and you don't seem to get as much of that. Much action going all the time as you do here. Here there just seems to be stuff going on all the time. But of course we're going to fold these couple of crummy hands here. Ace 10 was a good hand to open, but King 2 and these types of hands are not. As always, we're using our HUD. This is the other reason I like ACR is the HUD works well out of the box. So you can see sort of how many hands our opponents are playing and all that kind of stuff. If you go to the previous videos, I talk through what all these stats I show are. But the main ones to focus on are this first one here, VPIP, just tells you how many people, what percentage of hands players are playing. And the second one, pre-flop raise amount, tells you what percentage of hand these players are raising. This red number in the corner says how many hands we've played with these players. So most of these players we've never played with the exception of this guy, Rice and Beans here. But still, we only have 19 hands with them. Typically, you really need around 50 to start getting a decent sample size or whatever. So, you can't really trust any of the stats at this point for the most part here. And haven't seen any significant action, so we just don't really know any of these guys right now. So we'll see how this goes here. I am drinking some beer since this is Quack Poker. Today I'm drinking from Kona Brewery, their Fire Rock Pale Ale. Get it up there, yeah. Fire Rock Pale Ale from Kona Brewing Company. I've actually been, we got Ace Queen here. I've had some debates about whether or not it's worth it to open Ace Queen under the gun in a situation like this, full-handed table. 9-handed, it's probably okay. 10-handed, you probably can fold it. It's one of these borderline hands, like Ace Jack here, I'm probably always going to fold. Ace Queen is just right around close enough. And it's one of these things where if you can do this as an experiment with yourself, you can deal out a bunch of hands to a bunch of players and do this over and over again. And just see how often in a 9-handed table, a hand like Ace Queen is beaten. We do have a gut shot here. Not the best flop for us, though, because there's a decent chance our opponent connects with it. I'm going to bet like 90 here just because we do have some equity. We can make our pairs that can beat his stuff. We can make our straight. And if he's completely missed this board, he is just going to fold. So he probably didn't have anything there. I doubt he even had a jack there or whatever. And it's okay to get him to fold because he still has, any hand he has equity because they can make a pair against us. And that's not great for us. So I'm okay with the fold there. We spent 90 chips to win 160. I didn't want to bet too huge there. And I probably wouldn't have bet huge if I'd connected with that flop either. So I think we're kind of balanced there. But I think we just want to put out a bet to see, can we just take it down right there without giving him a chance to realize any equity against us, hit better cards than us, all that kind of stuff. If he called, we're kind of in trouble there, and we might just have to give up unless our hand improves. But he did not call, we took it down, and we're already up 100 chips, which really is not much at all in these sit and goes. We want to win some bigger pots, but it's okay to start picking these up so we don't start blinding out. We got a suited ace here in the big blind, and he's given us a pretty decent price. He's not raised even a full 3x. So I think we can go ahead and call and see a flop. We've got a backdoor flush and bottom pair on this flop. It's actually not a bad flop because he's not going to hit it super often. I mean, obviously, if he's got a hand like a made pair already, we're in a little bit of trouble. If he's got ace queen, we're in a lot of bit of trouble. But outside of that, there aren't too many hands we're scared of. He's only betting half pot here. I'm okay with a call here, and we'll just kind of see where this goes. The queen on the turn is kind of a mixed card because, I mean, if he was ahead of us before, he's still ahead of us now, but he's less likely to be ahead of us because he's less likely to have a queen here since another one came out. And when he checks back, he almost certainly does not have a queen. I think we're just going to check back to bluff catch here. Maybe he was chasing a flush and is now like worried and wants to just whatever, or he just gives it up here. And he had an 8. The one hand that could beat us, like an 8-7 suited middle pair hand there. I don't think it's worth it to bet that river because we're ahead of most hands there. He just happened to have one of the few hands that was slightly stronger than ours, where it's not going to try to bluff, and it's not, but it's also just going to check and kind of give up there, whatever. It's fine, whatever. It happens. I think we played all streets kind of fine there. And I don't think you usually want to turn that hand into a bluff because he's going to give up like he did a lot of time, usually with worse hands than us there. So there's no reason to try to bluff with our hand if we're already winning or whatever. We're not getting a lot of value there. And he could even be trapping on that turn. He's hit the second queen now, and he's just like, oh, okay, I've got this second queen. I've got 3 queens. I'm almost certainly not beat. Let me be a little sneaky, check it back for a bet on the river. He might be doing something like that. So there's no point in like trying to bet into him and basically getting us, potentially getting ourselves in a sticky situation. I think we played that last hand just fine. But all right, here we are. We're just cruising right now in these early stages. We're full ring. We're pretty deep stacked. We're not trying to get into too much trouble here, but we will try to pick up blinds and pick up smaller pots when we can and pick up big pots when we've got really good hands. I usually don't want to make big bluffs, especially at these stakes. Here we're seeing these guys get in this. Ooh, what happened there? Oh, this guy ended up making the straight. Beating out the kings here. The kings were an overpair, and they went for it on the flop, as you might expect. This guy called on the flop with his top pair. I think he called there, which is an interesting thing, because not all players will do that. Would be willing to risk their whole stack with top pair, medium kicker. But he did have the gut shot, which he hit, luckily for him. Jacks, I'm one of the people who likes to raise up jacks, and that's what we're going to be doing here, is raising these up. We're in position. It's a good hand. He's really got us beat. If he raises, we might have a problem, and we're probably usually beat when he raises, and we can potentially give it up. But I'm okay with this being one of the hands that we raise here, since we're usually going to be ahead. This board's a little scary. We could just check it back here, sort of for pot control and to kind of disguise our hand a little bit. The only hand, like, we don't want to see a queen or an ace necessarily, but it's not the worst. I say that. Yeah, we did not want to see that. I think we're just going to keep checking it back here, though. I mean, maybe we're missing some values for some 10s, but I'm willing to bet on the river here if he bets 20 to us. I'm going to bet fold here. This is like real thin, but I kind of feel like he's got a hand like a 10. He might have a weak ace here. You know what? I'm just going to call here. We're just going to call. Ace queen. Okay, so yeah, he was kind of trying to trap us there, trying to get his little min value in the river there. I was planning to bet that river if he hadn't bet into us there. The bet into us is kind of weird, and I didn't want to let him get away with a blocker bet there, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, he wasn't really blocking bet. He was, for some reason, trying to get tiny value out there. Maybe he thought we had a 10 or something like that. Could have gotten more value out of a hand like ours or whatever. So like he could have let out for more. The min bet there just doesn't make a lot of sense on his part. He might as well bet a little bigger with a hand as strong as his, because he can definitely get worse hands to call him. And I probably would have called like a bet of like 60 or something like that easily, if not bigger. So he should have bet more. We'll make a mental note of that. I'm not really typing in notes right now. Here we get it in already. Ace king versus queens. Reasonable hands to get it in with. Looks like the queens will hold, and ace king is not quite out, mostly because of those chips he won off of us in the last hand. He's not quite out yet, but yeah. His call was also, we also should think all through the steps of his hands and see if his plays were reasonable. His call pre-flop when we raised seemed reasonable. His raise pre-flop seemed reasonable with ace queen in the position he was in. So all of that seemed fine. I think he played the hand okay, other than he probably should have bet more on the river. He could have led the turn too if he wanted, but I'm kind of fine with him kind of being a little sneaky there, but he should definitely bet more on the river, I think. King Jack here, with the raise from under the gun, calling the call. Usually when the person who's under the gun is going to be raising with stronger hands already. And King Jack, even though it looks good, it's behind a lot of the hands he might raise here. The Ace Jacks, the Ace Kings get us, into big trouble. And then when you get two callers here, like the chance of us like being dominated with one or both of our cards is very high. And so, the only value we're getting here is like, okay, yeah, we flop a gut shot on a board like this, but somebody almost certainly has a pair here now, and we're behind, and we're going to have to start calling bets with a gut shot, which we're not really going to want to do. We just get into all sorts of trouble with King Jack. It looks nice, but it's just not really nice. And yeah, here we'd be giving up here for sure. I mean, this guy seems to be playing pretty reasonably, so when he gets it in, I'm pretty certain he's got an ace here. It seems pretty likely. I'd be surprised if he doesn't. So we would be way behind, and we would not want to call this bet, etc., etc. Two pair even, yeah. Versus the Ace Jack, kind of a cooler for the Ace Jack there. Yeah, I mean, but goes to show you, King Jack way behind there. Like I said, there we were, our Jack was dominated. If we had made our Jack, so if we'd called with that King Jack, and then we'd made our Jack, we would have lost money to this guy, because he's going to go with his Jack, and his Jack's going to be better. So we got to be careful in situations like that. King Jack looks like a great hand, but it's beat by almost every other hand that people like to play. The common, like, Broadway hands people like to play. So we're just cruising. This guy's open shoving, which is kind of big with his stack there. He's not short enough that he needs to be open shoving, but maybe he had like a medium pair and he didn't really know what to do with it, so he shoved it. That would be my guess. But we'll see. And sorry for the use of male pronouns here. I know it could also be a female player. I'm going to be right back because I spilled something. Sorry, spilled a little bit there, but we are good to go. Cleaning it up as we speak. My new poker table that this is all sitting on, and now you're hearing probably bumping and wobbling from, is speed cloth, and that actually is very drink resistant, which is nice because I tend to spill things. I should be using the cup holder in front of me here. So the beer is a pale ale, kind of hoppy beer. From Kona Brewing, which is on the big island of Hawaii. You can see even on their bottles, they have the islands on there. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's actually in the glass. They've got the islands there. And I've actually been to this brewery out in Kona. Kona is on the west side of the big island there. Kind of there's two big towns on the big island. There's Kona and Hilo. Not real big cities. The big island is not that populated. But yeah, there's a brewery there. Definitely worth a visit. Big Island's my favorite of all the islands in Hawaii. It's beautiful. It's not that touristy, not as populated. See the volcanoes, see the observatories, all that good stuff. Great place to visit. And you get to visit the brewery. Maui has a brewery as well. I haven't visited that one. And I assume some of the other islands now, with how popular brewing is, have it. I imagine there's like a brewery on Oahu or whatever. But Kona Brewing is one of the ones you see a lot of places. You'll see Maui's Brewing as well. This is interesting. I don't think we're going to win this hand without betting, and I think we're most likely to win it on this flop, so we might as well bet it there. Just make one and done kind of small bet there, small bluff there. Just try to take down that pot. Because our hand was shit there, and it wasn't going to get any better. So we might as well just bet it there. That board was paired, so it's very unlikely for our opponent to hit on a paired board, right? It's less likely to make a pair when there's a pair on the board, so that's cool for us. And yeah, so we're just cruising right now. A little bit below starting stack, but nothing to worry about. I think we've been playing fine. So this was pretty fast to see a guy get knocked out. You don't usually see people get knocked out this quickly, but it was in a reasonable spot where it was big hand versus big hand. And This guy almost got knocked out, but is clawing his way back here. We'll see if he can make it happen or not. So far, he seems to be playing pretty reasonably. He or she. And we get a raise from under the gun here to 75. I'm probably just going to let this go. If this had folded to us, I will play so many hands on the buttons when it folds to us, and I love to raise there and just try to steal the blinds in these sit and goes. But, yeah, under the gun bet here is going to be pretty strong probably. And then now we've got this guy going over the top, and we're definitely folding. Not anywhere near good enough. As you can see, so this guy's raising a little light under the gun, ace-10 suited here, and then calling it off too to this guy's shove. Ace-10 suited, you probably, it's close. I mean, if you're playing looser, you can open that under the gun. But we'll keep an eye on this guy for sure. Alrighty, King 10, even shittier than King Jack, but still an okay hand. This guy's limping here, and where he's raised before. I'm going to see what happens if we just try to raise it up. This isn't a great hand. I don't love it, but I want to see if this guy's limp is weak. Don't want to see this call behind here, but it's okay. I mean, we're still pretty deep stacked, so we can make moves like this and feel okay about it. This flop sucks because certainly one of these other players has hit it, and we're probably just not going to win here. I'm just going to check it. I'm not going to try to steal the spot here. Yeah, if neither of them have an ace, they might fold out on this one, but it's just not a great spot. And hey, we might get lucky and it checks through and we catch a jack and get our straight or something like that. If it checks to us again here, it'll be a little interesting. We could consider betting here, although the way this guy thought kind of makes me think he might have something, but that might be nothing, I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, we're just giving up here. Our king high is very rarely good, and it's very likely that this guy has a queen here or a weak ace or something like that. We're just gonna let this whole thing go. I'm gonna act like I'm thinking about it for a bit, but yeah, we're done. We could have gone different lines. We could have gotten more aggressive in this spot, but I just don't see a need to in these early stages here. Really try to fight for pots like that. It just wasn't a great flop for us to try to fight for. It wasn't an ideal pre-flop situation for us either. We probably could have three-barreled that and won that hand, though, if we'd really try to get aggressive at it. But, we're risking a lot of chips there, and there's not really a reason to, especially in these lower stakes sit and goes. People are probably making big enough mistakes that we can just look for other spots that are better. Here we have a suited one-gapper. I'm happy to raise it up, making it not quite 3 times the big blind. I think that's a fine size to make it. This flop is not the greatest for us. We got some potential, though, some backdoor draws, but we're often not going to have it. But I still think it's worth a bet here. The ace is actually probably good enough to keep barreling on and just see what happens here. I just feel like a lot of the hands he had that connected with the flop, if he's on a draw or something, he's just going to give up on this turn here. He's not going to want to keep going for it. With a pair of jacks or with a draw, which it's a very draw-heavy flop, I don't think he's going to want to go for it. So I think he's often going to give up here. So I know I just got over saying we're not going to make many big bluffs, but I think this is a spot where we can actually make a decent bluff here and have pretty high percentage of success with it, especially with that ace coming out, because he can assume oh, well, maybe that guy, maybe I was bluffing the flop, but I was bluffing the flop with an ace that got there on the turn or whatever. And I'm more likely to have an ace than he is, so, based on the pre-flop action, I'm more likely to have an ace than he is. Plus, he called on the flop, which means he's somewhat connected with it, which would mean, again, less likely for him to have an ace. So, yeah, I feel like for all of those reasons, that's a good spot to bet twice, bluff, and we're going to take it down a good bit of time. I don't think I would have bet a third time on the river there, because it is possible for him to have aces sometimes, or two pair, or a hand that this guy's just stubborn with, and he says, I've got a lot of chips and doesn't want to give it up. All of these things are possible. So I'm not going to try to go crazy there, but I definitely think that two-barreling it, betting on the flop, betting on the turn, is profitable there. I think we'll see. I mean, it was. It was for us there at least, and I don't think we had the best hand. All right. And it was interesting that he sat and thought about that one for a long time. I don't know what he had there. Maybe he had like a queen actually and was like, well, do I give this guy credit for the ace or not? You know, that kind of stuff. Or maybe he had a weaker queen and he was just like, well, am I really willing to call it down if he tries to bet again on the river? Who knows? Or maybe the guy just got interrupted by his dog or something like that and wasn't paying attention and was already ready to fold or whatever and just hadn't clicked the button. Who knows? But things that, you know, kind of pay attention to, see if there's patterns, might be important down the road. I think in these early stages, you're looking more for like the big mistakes. You're not really trying to pigeonhole all of your opponents. Whereas in the later stages, if you survive long enough where there's 4 players left or whatever, then you can really try to like focus on what everybody's doing and try to adapt to that and create some beneficial situations. But when we're playing a big table like this right now, you know, I don't think that stuff's as important. And we're more just looking for solid value spots at this point. Seeing this guy limp in here. I don't know what this guy's doing. He's the one we saw raising with ace-10 under the gun earlier. Now, to be fair, it was under the gun when we were only 8-handed as opposed to 9, so that's a little better. But now he's limping in middle position with a shortish stack. Not a typical move I want to do. This guy is raising way too big here on this flop, and this is kind of why you don't want to raise that. Oh, wait, no, he flop. They both flop the straight. I was like, oh, man, he got in trouble. He ran into a flop straight. No, actually, because he had a better flop straight, so that was kind of insane. He got stupid lucky there, because that's the thing with his real huge bet on that flop, even with a nutty hand like he's got there, like there's very few hands that can call you when you jam like this guy did. I mean, sets are going to call you, 2 pairs are going to call you, over pairs are going to call you, maybe, not even always. So, you know, and the made straights as he ran into, but all the weaker hands are going to fold out. So you might as well make a smaller bet on the flop and then maybe try to get it in on the turn or something like that. Because if you make a smaller bet on the flop, all the single pair hands, all the other draws that you're blocking their outs to, all that kind of stuff, all of those hands will probably stay in if you make a smaller bet. Whereas when he jams like he did there, like, it just doesn't get him value against these smaller hands. So I think his bet sizing was his or her smack out's bet sizing was wrong there. And so we'll keep that in mind. I mean, and if he always jams, when he jams, if he only jams with the nuts like that, it's also super exploitable. And it's one of those things where most players are going to make the right decision anyway. Like, they're not going to call you unless they've got a super strong hand. So you're just giving up. You've got a super strong hand, and everybody knows, hey, well, don't call that guy. He's got a super strong hand. So this guy shoving all in on that flop, I think, just really didn't make any sense. I'm going to raise it up here. Jack-8's an okay hand, not a great hand. These guys seem to be playing a little weak. Again, we don't have a ton of hands on them, but seem to be playing a little weak, so we can often steal the blinds from them. Flop like this is pretty good for us as well. I'm just going to make a small bet again. We are kind of making small bets when we're bluffing, which isn't great. I would often make these same types of bets for value. If I had ace-king there, I would probably bet pretty small too because I want him to come along. So I don't think it's terrible. I don't think we're being super exploitable there. But it's probably a little exploitable. It's a little not perfect, but at this level, I don't think people are paying enough attention, and they're just seeing like, oh, there's a bet, and I've got a shitty hand. I'm gonna fold, and they're not like paying attention to like, oh, this guy seems to be betting small a lot on flops. Does that mean I need to be calling more? I don't think a lot of these players aren't thinking of that level, and so we can play a little more exploitatively, even if we're not playing, perfect poker or whatever. We would have to play differently if we thought our opponents were super good or whatever. That all being said, I think a smallish bet there is not that crazy because I would probably bet pretty small with good hands as well. All right. I haven't been paying too much attention to this hand. Doesn't look like a ton's happened yet other than... did this guy limp or... I don't know. Who knows? I'm just going to drink my beer and we'll see. Maybe we get to see their hands at Showdown. One of the things I don't like about ACR is you don't get to see everybody's hands. In fact, it's got like really strict things on like whose hands you get to see or whatever. So you don't. Although actually, it seems like they're showing more hands today. I don't know. Okay, maybe they've changed how they show hands now because I'm actually surprised. It seems like they're showing more hands than they used to. All right. So what happened there? I'm just looking through the hand history here. You guys can see it up on the screen there too. Basically, we got a limp and a check, or a limp and a call from the small blind and a check, and JoJo bets, and JoJo had bet with, he's got top pair on that flop, so he bets out. The other guy had just the fives and felt like, yeah, he could call a couple bets. That all seems reasonable. Seems like a reasonably played hand there. Other than the limping or whatever. We'll keep an eye on the limping. In general, I think I've talked about this before in other videos. Limping is not a great strategy most of the time. When I say limping, I just mean calling whatever the big blind is as opposed to raising. Because if you're limping with your bad hands and then raising with your good hands, you're going to put yourself in this spot where it's really obvious to your opponents what type of hand you have. And when you're limping, you make your hand look weak. And if you really are weak, then your opponents know exactly how to play against you in those types of situations. We can put more aggression on you. We can raise you, all that kind of stuff. This is kind of an interesting spot. I'd almost want to take a stab because I feel like it actually goes through a decent percentage of the time, but maybe not quite enough. I'm just going to check it through and we're just going to lose this hand. It's fine. We could bet like 100 here, and I don't know if that works a good enough percentage of the time. If this guy's betting, probably not. Of course, he might just be saying, if I could take down the pot for 50, that's a great deal. He might have been thinking the same thing we did. And he did, in fact, take it down for 50. But I would guess that guy was actually just trying to get thin value, especially since we've seen him do that kind of stuff before. 6-4 here, not good enough to call an under the gun raise here. Although again, under the gun is less meaningful now. We're down to 6 players already. This is pretty fast progression for sit and go like this. This isn't a turbo or anything. The blinds are still relatively big. We've got starting stack, but we still got like 31. The blinds are relatively small, rather. Our stacks are relatively big. With a starting stack here, we still have 31 big blinds. So we're, in pretty good shape. We can still play some poker and stuff like that. And it's good to see other players get knocked out because that gets us closer to the money. So we'll see what happens here. But, we are below average stacks, so we got to keep that in mind. I'm just going to start min-raising here since, once we start getting down to this 30, 20s big blind range, we don't need to be betting as big pre-flop. Did not want to see this many callers. That being said, this flop, they shouldn't be connecting too much. So I'm going to make a bet here, and we're just going to see if we take it down. 170 to win 400. It doesn't have to work too often, and I think it will work a decent percentage of the time. It's not going to work this time. Bluffing into this many players is always kind of scary. At least now we're beating all the non-pair hands here. If he doesn't have an 8, doesn't have a 3, we're in good shape. This player might have an 8 or a 3, however. Or he might have like pocket 5s or something. I don't want to keep betting into this guy. We could have kept betting and kind of like trying to represent this hand, but if he's calling on the flop, it seems like he's often going to call in these later streets as well. This bet here on the river is interesting. I'm just going to have to let it go, though. I mean, I just don't know enough about what this guy's doing. I think a lot of players are doing this more for value. This guy, he showed more strength than us, and him calling us on the flop, we could be... Our hand looks like we bluffed the flop and gave up. He could be bluffing there. I don't know. He's got a lot of chips. He probably should be bluffing in spots like that a lot more. I don't really want to raise the suited queen. We could, but it's a little weak of a hand. We're just going to give that up here and see where things go. Another crappy hand here. Yeah, I don't think we've been in a lot of spots where we can make a lot of chips here so far. We haven't really had hands that connect. We haven't had any big hands so far. But that being said, we're not in a bad spot by any means. Yeah, we're below starting stack and a little bit, and somewhat significantly below average now. You can see the average stack of our opponents is 2,500 chips. So we're getting short. We're significantly less than our opponents, but that's still okay here. We're not in too bad a shape. We still have enough that we can play around. I don't think we're being destroyed by any of our opponents. All right, well, I don't think we have any plans of folding here. This 5 is a little bit scary because our opponent checked it back as opposed to trying to c-bet and bluff on this board, which means it could have been because he randomly had a 5 here and just decided to go with it. So this is why I'm checking instead of betting, is because I think it actually is pretty feasible for this guy. It's pretty plausible that he has a 5 here. And so we don't want to bet and get raised and have to be in an awkward spot because our hand seems pretty strong. I also think if this guy just didn't connect with this board at all, he's not going to call anything we bet, so we don't have to be too afraid of it. It is showing all the hands now. That's different. Okay, so he did try to just bluff that turn with that king 8, so that's worth noting that this guy at least does bluff sometimes, which, seems like a silly thing to note, but there are a lot of players at these stakes that won't ever try to bluff and take things down like that. He also tried to bluff with like a real small bet there, so just worth noting that like this guy will take very tiny stabs and things like that. A6 we can let go. It's not that great a hand. This guy also hasn't been raising much. You can see he's only raised 2% of hands, and we've seen about 50 hands with this guy. Granted, some of those are from another session, so maybe he's playing differently today than whenever the last session was, but still worth noting. Yeah, I mean, this guy hasn't been raising a ton today. See, here he is limping again. So I suspect when he raises, he has a good hand, and so even with our hand there, like a weak ace, aces are usually good, but against someone who is representing a strong hand, a lot of strong hands have aces in them and will have our hand beat. So we just don't want to get into trouble there. We're also in the small blind, which means we're going to be out of position in the hand, acting first at every street, and that's just not a beneficial money-winning spot for us. So I am okay with letting it go there. I think we've talked about pale ales on this show before. Pales are just, it comes from the malt they use. They use this pale malt. It's just kind of a standard malt that they use, but they're often kind of slightly hoppy beers with like more of a hop forward character. And so you might be used to like India Pale Ales is another place you hear about it. India Pale Ales usually implies that they're a good bit more hoppy, but a lot of the pale ales, nowadays are pretty hoppy as well. And I say nowadays, I don't know if it's really true historically either, but you never really know when something's just labeled pale ale if it's going to be really hoppy or if it's just going to be kind of middle of the road, whatever. Always hard to tell unless they give you the details. This one is not as hoppy as I would say like a normal IPA is, but it's definitely got that decent amount of hop character to it. And so it's pretty, I would say it's pretty nice, pretty refreshing. Like it's good if you want something hoppy, but not too hoppy. Find a drink on a nice Hawaiian day. right. I haven't been paying too much attention to what these guys are doing other than this big stack seems kind of active, although if we look at his stats, he hasn't been playing that many hands. But he might be a solid player, although not raising pre-flop as much as we would expect. But we don't have a huge sample size, so it's hard to say if that's just, he hasn't been getting great hands or he really doesn't raise as much as he should. Usually like good players you'll see with like stats of like 24-20, something like that, where they're playing about a quarter hands and raising most of those hands that they're playing. 202. Again, I don't want to make this super huge. We're at a real dangerous spot with our stack of this 14 big blinds. We could just open shove here, but we're right in the territory where we can also just make these smaller bets. And if these smaller bets are taking down the blinds, which they seem to be, people seem to be playing fairly weak, then I think doing these smallish raises are okay here as opposed to just shoving all in. Our hand is almost good enough to where I think we could have shoved it all in there. But I also just like the min raising, and then if we got shoved on, we'd probably fold, and we can avoid, running into huge hands that way. Yeah, it's unfortunate that we don't have a bigger stack, because we could probably call this pretty easily. But here I don't feel super comfortable calling it. It's an okay hand, but it just doesn't hit the flop enough times to be worth putting in this big of a chunk of our stack. So this is a fun hand to play if you're deep stacked, but a pretty bad hand to play when we're not, when we're pretty shallow stacked and calling represents a huge chunk of our stack, and we're going to have to give up on most flops because we're just not going to connect at all with it. We have an ace on the button here. I'm just going to min raise again here, and we will see. Get one caller. I'm not feeling great about that, and not feeling super about this flop. We can make a one and done sort of bet here, but I think it's actually okay just to check it back. Our hand's pretty weak. Maybe we check it down and we just win this one. If this guy bets, though, we're just going to give it up. And he should be betting, being more aggressive here. And like I've said, I've kind of noticed this guy being aggressive. Real hard to say, though, if he's had it or not yet. We haven't seen him show down any bluffs or anything yet, so you can't really say for sure what this guy's doing right now. But he's got a big stack. He doesn't really have anything to worry about, so at this point he should just be trying to push us around, using those chips to kind of put pressure on the other players and slowly chip himself up, because he doesn't have much to lose. He's almost the biggest stack, so he's not going to go broke even if he gets into a baddish spot. Weird to see those guys go all in there. It was like an ace versus an ace. This guy had ace 10. I think he had ace 7 there. Weird to see them go all in, I say, as I'm about to go all in with this. But it's weird because, this guy probably should have just folded that hand. It's just not strong enough to shove over a raise from the other guy here. Ace 7 is a good hand to open when you're short stacked, but you don't want to be calling somebody's open because you're often going to be beat, or shoving over somebody's open because, again, you're often going to be beat there. This is close, but this guy hasn't been raising a ton, and so I feel like his range is pretty strong. I'm just going to let it go. It's close, though. I think a lot of players would call there. I just think that also represents a huge chunk of our stack. We're dominated a decent amount of the time. Here we're seeing some players get it in here, and we are likely to be down to 4 players, it looks like. Yeah, this guy almost pulled it out with the flush, but did not get there. So that's cool, but we are the short stack by a lot here. This is kind of an interesting spot. I am just going to jam it all in here. Our hand is okay, but not great, but it'll survive a lot of all-ins or whatever. We'll have decent equity against a lot of hands that are going to call us. I am going to shove this hand again, especially since we've been shoving so much. People might get tired of us and start calling with crappier hands, like a ace-5 or something like that. And at this point, I will take getting called by ace-5 and say run the cards, because we're going to be way ahead and we can feel good about that. If we get called by a bigger hand, it sucks. It's bad luck, but we're the short stack at this point. So the pressure's on us, because if we just sit here and do nothing, we're going to blind out and these guys will get the money. So, again, we are on the bubble here. Why is it going to be this guy raising? I'm just going to call and see a flop here. We actually have enough chips now where this is okay, too. We're 17 big blinds deep. We can start calling stuff a little more. We don't have to shove every single thing. He's probably going to bet here, and we're going to have to give it up. If he's a decent player, at least, he's going to continuation bet here and give it up. And honestly, he might just have us crushed at this point. Okay. I'm going to bet this is like, do I really want to bet here? Like, I kind of just feel like his check back there was just like, I have nothing on this board. I'm just giving up here. And maybe he's just going to give up here. This is a risky play. I don't know. I don't know how this guy is playing. I don't know what he's doing. We've seen him give up before. Maybe he just has a monster hand and is like, let me let this other guy get here. This was the risk of us making this bet here. And this raise is so small, like he might just be abusing us and seeing our like steal here for what it is. I don't know. I wasn't crazy about that spot. I could have checked it there, but I don't know. I just want to see what would happen. That's what happened. I think you could definitely argue just kind of giving up there. I think the call pre-flop is probably mandatory. I don't think it was a good spot to shove over to that guy. Let's see here if we could just see a free flop here. We just limp in here, see what this guy does. This guy might just be in the, like, abuse mode now. Like, he's got a big stack, and he's just going to do this all day. I think that's what's going on. So we're going to just have to be more willing to go with it at this point. Suited queen on the button with 11 big blinds, but there's no antes. I think suited queen 7 is probably a fold here. It's real close. I don't know. I'd have to look at the charts and stuff and see, but I think it's real close. Given how tight the player in the big blind's been playing, I don't think he's going to call that off super light, so maybe it is okay to just shove that there, but it felt a little weak. I'll have to go back and look at the charts and see what that actually says to do there. We talked about, if you look in the tournament review, we talk about the push fold charts, and this is definitely where they come into play here, where we just want to make the mathematically correct plays here, and there are just well-defined mathematically correct plays for our stack size that just tell you either put it all in with this hand or fold this hand. That's about it. And I have a decent idea of where those are, what those are for our stack, but not 100% on all of them. And I think queen 7 suited, definitely on the borderline. Like queen 5 suited almost certainly is not shoving there. But again, if we think that this guy who was in the big blind there doesn't want to call down at all, isn't going to call our shove very often at all, then it might be okay, because 90% of the time we're just going to take it down there, and then 10% of the time where we get called, we at least have some equity, typically. Okay, just playing with the cut card here. While we wait, we would love to see one of these guys get it all in, but unfortunately, like, all of these guys have very similar stacks, and they're pretty deep stacked. And we definitely don't want to see. I would like to see the chips going away from the middling stacks. Instead, they're going away from the big stack, but only slightly. So as long as they have an even number of chips, like, they really should just be waiting for me to kind of go out. And I think most players know that. And I think we're just going to have to double up at some point here in order to have a fighting chance. We get called by King Jack, and we are definitely ahead of that. This flop is favorable for us, and we hit a 7 on the river. That is good for us. So here's our double up. I was just talking about that. I don't think his call with the King Jack is too bad. We were 8 big blinds deep or whatever. I'm going to try a min raise again here and see what happens. If this Gumbler Kules calls us, yeah, he might be just trying to abuse us all the time here. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. But that's what he should be doing. I don't like... This is where I think a lot of players at this level don't really understand the strategy of like, hey, if you've got a bigger stack, start picking on the little guy. I think a lot of players don't know that strategy very well, but I think this guy to my left does, and especially him being to my left and him having the most chips really puts us in a bad spot right now. And yeah, I mean, he can just make stabs like this, and we can't really play around too much because it's a big chunk of our stack. So we just have to kind of decide every decision. Like we kind of have to decide, like, are we going with this? Is this it? You know, and that's bad for us. Whereas he doesn't really have to worry about risking his tournament life at all because he's got so many more chips than us. I think we will. This is an interesting spot. I think we're going to just bet here and just try to take it down. This is like a protection bet for sure. God, I don't like seeing that turn. I don't know what this guy's calling us with. Maybe just an ace, but he might have like puke. I think this, I mean, we're getting such a good price here. I have to call. This really sucks. I think he almost certainly has us beat. I'm just going to call, though. We're just going to see what happens. We just got such a good price. Jesus, he's got aces. Okay. Yeah, so he's way ahead. Because I was like, yeah, I don't know what he calls us with on that flop. Maybe I should have just made it smaller on that flop and he's just going to give it up. But I just want to give him a bad price because 95% of the time we're ahead there. But a small percentage of the time, like, he's got us way beat there. In the small blind, 10 big blinds, 8-7 suited, or 8-7 offsuit, I think still is a shove there. Even with no antes, I think that's still fine. Pretty sure. Pretty sure that shove's okay. Yeah, I think, yeah, running into the aces there sucked. I don't think I need to bet as quite as big. I could have bet like 200 and probably accomplished the same things. Calling on the river, I mean, it felt terrible, but you know, we gotta stand up for ourselves a little. We did have a pair. I am just gonna jam it in here, especially since we've been shoving so much and people have seen us shove. Like, I think we can get called. We want to be shoving with all our hands here, pretty much. Not all our hands, sorry, but like all our good hands in addition to our like medium hands. I don't think it's a good idea to just... I think sometimes it's okay to kind of limp or min-raise those hands or whatever if we're sometimes limp and min-raising other hands. I think that's okay sometimes to try and stay balanced there. I don't know. We could have played this king sneaky is all I'm saying. But I'm fine with not because eventually people are going to go, oh, this guy's shoving all the time and feel like they have to call and hopefully call us off with something worse. Man, I wish this guy didn't raise, and he raises the 3x2. This is a big raise, so he almost certainly has to call us, and, you know, he's not raising much. Like, I believe this guy's got a big hand, you know. If this number is correct and he's raising the top 12% of hands, like, he's ahead of our ace-7 suited there, so we do just have to give that one up, as sad as it is to lay down a hand as strong as that. Now, this guy limping, on the other hand, I don't think is that strong. Maybe he's trapping us. But you know what? I'm just going to see if we can get an extra free big blind there. Ace-6 versus king. Why does he limp the ace-6 suited? Gosh. All right. Well. Oh, and the king on the river just to rub it in. Okay, well, we're out. We bubbled the tournament. It was top 3 pay, top 4 did not. I think our shove right at the end there was not that crazy at all. We had a pretty strong hand. Seeing this guy limp means his hand's not that strong. If you look at the math, actually, it was probably mathematically fine for us to shove there because our hand was not, we were whatever, like, I bet I can look it up here actually and see exactly how far behind we were in that hand. So in that hand, okay, we were like 40% to our opponent's 61%. So if we figure some of the time our opponent is folding there, like, that's pretty awesome. And even when he calls, if we're 61 to 39, which is more than I thought it would be, but if we're 61 to 39, there's dead money in there. There's a big blind he put in. There's the other big blind that the big blind put in. There's what the small blind put in. It's not bad. It's not the worst. I'm okay with it. I'm surprised to see him limp call ace-6 suited there. I don't know what the strategy was there, but maybe I don't know if he planned on that going in, if he thought that was a trap or what. Usually if you're going to trap, you want to trap with stronger hands than ace-6 suited. I don't know. It's an interesting strategy, I guess. But he might as well just min-raise. He accomplishes a lot more min-raising and risks a lot less bad things happening. Like, he doesn't necessarily want to see a flop against these other guys. Maybe he was just trying to keep the pot small in case the other guys got involved, but then that doesn't explain, like, why he would go with it against me. I don't know. And he happened to catch us with one of the worst hands we've been shoving, right? Like, we've been shoving a lot of better hands than that, too. We had kings a few hands earlier and some stronger aces and stuff like that. So, we kind of got unlucky there. But, I think we played the whole tournament fine. I think it was, it was just a spot where early in the tournament we didn't have a lot of opportunities to make a lot of chips. I think there were a couple minor missteps that I pointed out as we were doing it of, like, maybe you could have done things differently, little stabs I wanted to try, but we didn't make any mistakes that cost us a lot of chips. And then I think at the end, I think our play was all reasonable. I think the king-9 shove at the end, yeah, you could argue just folding there, but, like, what if he starts limping all the time? Are we going to fold every hand? Like, we don't have that many. We only had 10 big blinds. We don't have that many more hands we get to see before we're just out of chips. So I think all being said, it was fine. It was a fine spot. We took a shot. And look at that, looking at that again, like 61% to 39%. If we doubled up there, his stack would have been pretty short. Our stack would have been pretty competitive, at that point. Yeah. I mean, because his stack, he had 23 big blinds. So he risked, almost half his stack in that hand. And so if we won that hand, which we would have 40% of the time, 39% of the time, if we won that hand, we would have had a pretty big stack. He would have been super at risk, and we almost certainly would have made the money and been in a running for winning the whole thing. So, it's a 40% chance at that when we were coming in as this short stack. Ain't that bad. All in all, I think we played it fine. If you think I messed something up, comment below, and I will see you next time. Have a good one. Cheers.